Okay, so welcome back. Today we're going to talk about basic Python classes. So, like, what is a class? Well, you can think of a class as a blueprint, kind of like a recipe, and we can use that recipe to create an object. Okay, so we're going to use an example of creating like a D&D character sheet for our examples today. So let's go with the objectives. The objectives is we're going to create that blueprint, which is basically going to create our character class. And inside that blueprint, we're going to assign our character attributes. So that's going to be like their hit points and their race and stuff like that. Then we're going to talk about methods. And basically, like a method would be like the function where the character has to perform some types of action. Then we're going to move on to instant variables, and we're going to talk about like the shared variables versus unique variables. And then incapacitation, I'm probably slaughtering that word, but we're going to talk about private stats. So sometimes our character might have stats we don't really want other people to see. We kind of want them to be hidden from the other characters, so we'll show you how to do that as well. Then we're going to talk about inheritance, which is basically creating a character class, from a class. So, for example, we have our core character that's already in a class, and let's say we want to create a wizard and a warrior. And obviously, a wizard and warriors will have some different attributes, so we can actually create those special classes and inherit from the other class. And then we'll talk about polymorphism, which is basically the same actions, different results, because, a wizard, his attack might be a fireball, where a, warrior, it might be an axe or a sword or whatever. And we can sit there and define that for those different actions. So if that sounds good, let's get started. Alright, so let's talk about blueprints and attributes. Okay, so basically a blueprint is going to be kind of like a template. So you can think of your class as the template, and inside that template we're going to assign attributes, which is going to be like your hit points, your race, anything that has to do with your characters, etc. Later on we'll do the methods that will show you what those characters does, what's inside that class itself. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, for a basic blueprint, we're going to do class, and then we're going to do character, and I like to use uppercase for my character, for my title case, I should say. And then I'm going to put my colon in there, and for this situation, since we're just doing the blueprints, I'm going to pass. So that's basically creating a character. That's my template. It's not doing anything because I'm not passing anything to it. Now, if I want to assign that to an object that we actually can use, I can do hero, and then how am I going to create that object? Well, I'm going to create it using the character template. So I just assign character, open and close parentheses, and I run that. So now, if I print the character, or I should say if I print the hero, it's not going to show me really anything because I'm not really passing anything to it at this time. So if I run that, it's just going to show that it's a character object, right? So my hero and my character. So my character is my template, and then here is my object. Okay? So that's basically a basic sense on how we create a blueprint. So let's go down and actually make this blueprint useful by assigning it attributes. Alright, so we created a basic blueprint for our character, but we didn't really assign any attributes to it, so we're going to assign the attributes now. So how do we do that? Well, instead of just passing, because we didn't really assign anything, we just kind of used that as a placeholder to show you how to create a basic blueprint. So now I actually want to assign attributes to it. So how do I do that? Well, I do the DEF, right? And then basically that's going to start my function. Then I'm going to initialize my variables. And then I want to start with self. Okay, and what is self? Self is basically pointing back to the character itself. So, for example, if I call a hero, it needs to bring back that class, and what it's bringing back the self. What is the attributes? So those are going to be self, and this will probably make a little bit more sense when you see it. So I do self, and let's say I want to pass some variables to this because I want my characters to have different names. Because again, this is a template, so we're using it for all our character creations. So we want our characters will have different names, they'll have different races, and they'll have different classes. And I'm using CLS because I don't want to use the reserved word class. Okay? So I'll put my colon up here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm doing the self, because again, we're calling the self, the character itself. Okay? And then I'm going to say name equals name. And the name is going to be the name that I pass in. Okay, so it's really that simple. So I'm going to do the same thing for the race and the class. Okay, equals class. Okay, so now I pass in the name, the race, and the class. Now, let's say there's some things I want my characters to have that's going to be common across the board. So I want all my characters to start with hit points of 10. Okay? Then I want to do self level equals, let's say, 1. So everyone's level is going to start at 1, and that's going to be the basic of my character. Okay? So once I do that, I can call hero and create an object from the character class. Okay. Now this won't work right now because I need to pass in the name, race, and the class. So if I want to create a barbarian, I'll say he's Conan. And then the race, he's going to be human. And the class, he's going to be barbarian. Okay, and if I run this, I just created a hero class. Okay, so I created Conan. Now I can't just do print hero because it's going to call the class itself. I need to actually know what I'm calling. So what I mean by that, if I do print hero, it's going to give me something similar to saying I'm just calling the class, right? It doesn't really show me anything that I want. But if I do hero dot name, for example, it will bring back Conan. And if I want to know how many hit points Conan has, I can do hero dot hit point, and I have 10 hit points. So I can really call in each little section from the name, race, class, what you have, and I'll have that information, right? And this would be useful because, again, when I create multiple characters, I can just name them multiple things, and instead of just hero, I can say, I could do something like, Conan equals character, and then if I copy this, and then I just kind of put down here, and I put down I don't know, wizard, and then I'm gonna name my maybe my wizard's an orc. And we'll say that, he's a wizard because I said he was a wizard. I don't really know a good name for a good wizard. We'll just call him Bob. I think Bob's a good name for him. Now, if I run this, right, now what I can do is I can do Conan because I named my Conan object. And if I do my class, it's going to bring back Barbarian, like it should. But now, if I do Wizard, it brings back Wizard, right? And if I bring back his name is Bob. Okay, so I got a wizard named Bob. So this kind of shows you that using a template, you can get create multiple characters off that template. Okay, So we're going to show you some more things we can do with this here in a section. All right, so one more key concept that I want to show you before we move on is that we have our print wizard.name. So let's take name out, for example, and we'll go back to print wizard. And it just shows, it's a character object. Same thing that we did Conan. When we had our hero, it showed the same thing. But let's say that I don't want that to show that. I actually want to return something more meaningful, okay? I can always come up here and then have a string function and use str and return self, okay? And basically what we're going to return is we're going to do an f string, and we're going to do the self.name because that's what we want to return for this. And then we're going to say, I don't know, the race, I guess. We'll do the race. Okay. And then I could say the level. Right, the level, and we want to bring back the self.level. Okay, and then what I want to end up doing is bring back his hit point, and you can add or take away as much as you want on this. I'm just doing this as an example. And we're going to do the hit point, okay? And basically now, if I run this, what's going to happen now if I print Conan, it's going to say Conan the human, level 1, hit point 10. So it brings me back more information on Conan by using the string function up here to call back self, okay? Same thing, if I go to wizard, it's going to bring me back Bob's information. So Bob the Orc, and he's level 1, hit points 10. So you can see kind of like the power of the templating. So let's move on to the next section. All right, so let's talk about methods, right? So we have our core class up here. So if I want to do a method, and these are basically going to be actions, anything that we want our characters to do, okay? So if I want to do an attack, for example, so I'll do attack. Okay, so I'm going to actually attack. And attack, I'm going to call self. And I'm going to put my little colons up here. And how do I want to do this? Well, I want to sit there and do return function. Okay. And then I'm going to do an f string, and I'm going to say self.name, and then I'm going to say let's do this, punches, because they all can punch, and we'll just say it's for 1 damage. Okay, and then I can sit there and run this, and that's going to allow my characters to punch for 1 damage. Okay, so if I do print and I do Conan and I say I want Conan to attack, if I can spell attack right, okay, it's going to come back that he punches for 1 damage. So Conan punches for 1 damage. And if I have my wizard, Bob punches for 1 damage. Okay, so basically creating a method for common action is really easy as that. As you know, that like I'm not rolling the dice here, I'm not doing anything like that. It's just kind of a basic attack. I'm not taking really damage away from the other person. I'm probably not going to go on a deep dive down that entire logic on that. But I do just kind of want to show you that we can do the common actions such as, fighting, like punching and stuff like that. But after this section, I'm talking about, you should be able to start seeing how this works, and you'll be able to incorporate your own mechanisms for taking damage and stuff like that a little bit later on at the end. Alright, so let's talk about instant variables, and we're going to talk about shared versus unique. Okay, to kind of explain this in a simple terms, I guess, this ain't a very long section. So basically what we have here, what's highlighted on the screen, we have the self.name, self.race, and so forth. All these are unique. Okay, those are unique to your character. So every character is going to have different information down here. So these are going to be the ones that are unique to the character that you assign. Now, if we want something to be shared across everything, for example, maybe we want a world to be named, for example, I can come up here before I define that first function, and I can do world equals, and then I'm going to say, I don't know what's a good name for a magical world. I'll just call it my magical world. Okay, so now when I do world equals my magical world, that's going to be shared, and that's going to be shared among all characters. Okay, and if I run this now, if I come down here and do a print, and I'll move this up so we can see a little bit better, and then I can do like Conan.world. It's going to say my magical world, and I do Bob. I'm sorry, if I do wizard, because my wizard's name Bob, it would say my magical world. Okay, so basically, again, this is going to be all characters. That's going to be shared always. Down here, anything with self on it, those are going to be unique to that specific character. I understand that we called the self 10 and the self 1, and you're like, well, wait a minute, that's common among characters. In this instance, yes, but that is not always true, because we can override those things in self. Okay, we're not going to override the world in our class. Okay, meaning that if once I call this character, and this will make sense a little bit later on, that I can change these variables and assign new variables based on the character type I'm creating, but my world is always going to hold true among all classes. Okay, so what are we going to do now? We're going to talk about encapsulation. So basically, if I want things hitting from the user, where I don't really want people to call stuff by nature to see it, I can actually hide it and make it private. So really quick, if I do a new character class here, okay, so I have a new character class, and to keep this simple, I'm just going to do init, and then I'm going to do self name. Okay, and like I said, I'm keeping this simple. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say self.name equals name. I like my spaces. Okay, and then now what I want to do is I want the hit points to be private. So I'm going to do double underscores to let Python know that this is going to be private. And then I'm going to do hit point equals 10. So that's going to be private. You're not going to be able to see it. But there are some times I'm going to want to call it, so I can do get HP, and I can say self, okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to return my hit points. Okay, and I'm going to go down here and I'm going to create a hero equals, and I'll say character, and then I'm going to say Bob. We'll play with Bob today. And we'll hit enter. So now we know that my hero, if I do print hero, we know that my hero is Bob, right? So I can do hero name, and it's going to bring back Bob. Now I want to bring back the hit points, right? But like I said, we declare those private for the character. So my hero, when I sit there and run that, I'm not going to be able to bring the hit points back by doing, hero.hp. It's going to give me, there's no attributes, right? If I do the double underscore like we declared it, again, no attributes. So it's really hidden from that class. I can't call it natively back from self because I made it private. So to get that, what I'd end up doing is instead of hero dot whatever, I do hero dot get HP, and I'll be able to see it now, right? So it says the bottom left character get HP of that, and you're like, well, wait a minute, why is it giving me that? Well, that's because I forgot my open close parentheses. So if I run that, it's going to actually bring back 10. Okay. So we do the print hero get HP. That's how I will actually get that hit points back. So, and this is good. If we want to be more explicit, we can hide that from the character itself, and that way we can't call it directly, and we can actually just kind of bring back it using a different function on that. All right. So let's move on. All right, so we're going to talk about inheritance, and this is basically we're going to take a class and we're going to call another class. So in this example, we have a character class, and then down here we named our Conan object into this character over here, Conan, human and barbarian. Same thing with the wizard. Wizard's Bob, orc, and wizard. We know that there's going to be a difference between barbarians and wizards. Okay, that's a no-brainer. So how do we do that? How do we sit there and make those changes? Well, we can do that through inheritance. So let's create a class that, for the wizard, for example, that's going to call the character class. So to do that, what we're going to end up doing is we are going to have a class, and we're going to call it wizard. And that wizard is going to call the character class. So basically what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to create a class just for my wizard. So when I create a wizard, it's going to leverage or inherit this class up here for the character. Okay? So how does this work? Well, we're going to have our little function. We're going to initialize our variable. Okay? We're going to call self like we normally do. And I'm just going to say that I want my name, because I want to pass in the name and I want to pass in the race. Okay, I'm not going to pass in the character class or the class of the character, like is he a wizard or anything in this section. Okay, I'm going to do that a little bit later on in the code. But I am going to define, I want my mana to equal 20. Okay, and I'm doing it up here. I could do it like in the self command, but I'm going to do it up here. So mana equals 20. Okay, so now I want to be sure that I leverage the character class. So how do I leverage that character class? Well, I'm going to do super, and that's going to let it know that I am going to call the main character class. Then I'm going to do dot init. Okay, and what am I going to pass that character class? Well, if I look at it, it's expecting the name, the race, and the class right here. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, I'm going to say that we're going to pass in the name, we're going to pass in the race, and we're going to pass in the CLS, right? And you're like, well, wait a minute, we didn't really call the CLS up here when we're going to call our wizard class. That's true, we didn't, because we wouldn't want to say hey, wizard, I'm creating a class of a wizard. It just doesn't make sense to do it that way. So what we'll end up doing is we'll do class equals wizard here, and that way the user doesn't have to know that it doesn't have to declare a wizard class. It's predefined because I'm creating a wizard through the class. Okay, hope that makes sense. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to do self.mana. Now I could have sat there and did self mana equals 20. I'm talking, I could have done it that way, but since I already declared the 20 up here, I'm just going to do self mana equals mana. Okay. Now I hit enter, and now I have a wizard class. So how do I get that to be in an object? Well, I can do, let's say, we'll do Tim the wizard. Okay, Tim the wizard, and we're going to call the wizard class, and we're going to say our wizard is Tim, and let's say Tim is a elf. Okay, so I don't know if he's a night elf, a high elf, or whatever. He's just an elf. Okay, so now if I sit there and run, not run, but if I print Tim the wizard, right, and I run this, what you're going to find out is it's going to bring back information that we defined in the character class. So for example, up here we define the string self. So this is actually going to bring back that string. So now I know Tim the elf, he's level 1, hit point 10. Now if I want more information on him, I can say print Tim the wizard .mana, and it brings me back his mana. Okay, and if I bring back his CLS, brings back wizard because I passed in the wizard class. If I brought back the wizard string up here to this class up here to the character class, and that's why it got passed right here. So name, race, and class is being passed by name, race, and class from the super function. So now that we have this wizard and it's Tim the wizard, we can actually add more wizard-like functions, right? So what do I mean by that? So I can sit there and I want my wizard to have his custom attack, for example. So I can do like a function that says cast spell, and then I'm going to say self, and then I'm going to say spell. Okay, and then I can sit there and take this and I can say, well, let's return, and then we can do the F string, and we can do the self name to pass in that variable, cast, and then we can say spell. Okay, and this is just very simple, right? So we have cast spell, and I can run this, and now I have that, right? But now what I can do is I want to call that cast spell, so I take Tim the wizard, cast spell, and then we're going to say for his cast spell, we're going to sit there and say that it's a magic missile, right? You know, and we run that and it says Tim cast magic missile. So we can sit there and do that. Now, if I want to use this default attack, right, we could sit there and have a default attack in there, but we define that in the character class up here, right? So if I want to sit there and take this cast spell, for example, and actually let me go up to the top because I don't think I copied it down in there. I did not. So this attack self right here, I'm going to go back to my inheritance and I'm going to put in the basic attack spell, or not a spell, but the basic attack, for example. So now if I run this, I'm still going to get Tim cast the magic missile. But if I didn't want Tim to cast the magic missile and I want him just to run this attack up there because that's common among all classes, I can just say wizard.attack, and I'll say, Tim punches for 1 damage, right? So that's basically how we can set down leverage. And again, if I want the special wizard attack, I can just say cast spell, magic missile, right? And then Tim casts that magic missile spell. So it's really, simple as that. Now, if I wanted to create another class for my barbarian, how would I do that? All right, so let's start building the barbarian class. So if we go down here, and we'll have the class, and actually we'll just kind of copy this wizard class right here, and we'll just kind of make this into a barbarian class, just make it simple. So we'll do barbarian, B-A-R-B-A-R-I-N, right, barbarian. I know I misspelled it earlier, but we're going to have the barbarian. So we know the barbarian's not going to have mana, so we're going to take that out. And we're just going to pass in the name and the race. He might have something else, but we're going to keep this simple. Now, for the class, again, we know that he's going to be the barbarian, B-A-R-B-A-R-I-A-N, barbarian. So we're going to make him the barbarian. And again, he doesn't have any mana. So basically, we have the class, the barbarian, and we're passing in the name and race, and then it's going to call the main character class, and it's going to be the name, race, and the character is going to be a barbarian. Okay? So we know that a barbarian doesn't cast spells, but we do know a barbarian attacks with a weapon, right? So what we can do weapon underscore attack, okay? And then, again, it's not going to be a spell. It's going to be a weapon of his choosing. And then we're going to return the name. And then we're not going to cast a spell. What we're going to do, we're going to attack, right, with a weapon. Okay? And then we run that, and then that's simple as that. Right, now we have a barbarian, right? So how do we call that, right? So if you remember up here, and we say Tim the wizard equals wizard because we're calling that wizard class. Down here, what we're going to do is we're going to say John the barb, okay? And John the barb, he's going to be a barbarian, so we're going to make him the barbarian class. B-A-R-B-A-R-I-A-N, barbarian. And again, his name's John. And let's say John's a giant. Okay, we don't have any giants yet, so we'll make John a giant. Okay, now that makes John a giant. So now I can say print John the barb. Okay, and if I run this, I get John the Giant level 1 hit point 10, and that's coming from up here from my character class because that comes specifically from this section right here. We can still perform a regular attack with him, so I can do, well, actually let's do this. Let me do .cls just to show you that he's a barbarian. Okay, so now I can do attack and then make John punch for 1 damage. Okay, but if I want to do a weapon attack, I can just sit there and say weapon underscore attack because, the John, the barb object can actually do a weapon attack. So this is going to be unique to John the barb because he's a barbarian. And I can say I want him to attack with an axe. And I run this, and now John attacks with an axe. Okay, I can say a bow, John attacks with the bow, and so forth. So again, this is kind of what the basics are. Now, you would build something else out, for damage and stuff like that, but this is just kind of showing you just the basics, so you can, expand on building the classes and kind of fit what you need. Okay, so now what we're going to do is talk about polymorphism. So basically, if we want the same action but we want to have different results, we can do that. Okay, so let's say that I don't want to remember to cast a spell or do a weapon attack. If I'm a wizard, I just want to attack. If I'm a barbarian, I just want to attack, right? So it's really something that I want to do just for consistency sake. So how do I do that, right? It's because if I run this right now, and I run the cell, it says Tim cast magic missile, John attack with the bow. Okay? Which is fine, but I'm calling cast spell and I'm calling weapon attack. So what polymorphism, what it kind of lets me do is down here in my wizard class, I just do attack. And then down here in my barbarian class, I just do attack. Okay? So now all I do is do attack, and it's going to attack based off of my class. Okay? So instead of doing a cast spell, magic missile, I can do attack, and I'm attacking with magic missile. And then John the Barb, I can just do attack, right? And I'm attacking with the bow. Okay? So just to kind of show you, like, this would be different, we'll say, a sleep spell, okay? And then he's going to attack with a sword this time, right? And if I run this, it says Tim casts sleep spell, John attacks with the sword. It's the same results that we had earlier, but using polymorphism, we can just sit there and say, this is my basic attack for this character, this is my basic attack for that character, and I can just use the word attack instead of using stuff like cast spell or attack with weapon. It just makes it simple and makes it straightforward what I'm doing with my code and what I'm doing with my classes. It's really simple as that. Okay, so that's the basics on classes. Now, obviously, there's more you can do with classes, especially in this situation. Like, we can, create ways to level up the characters. We can add weapons as objects. We can sit there and add spell books for your wizards. We can use similar functions how we created the heroes and add different types of monsters. And then again, to use these classes in a program, you might do a small turn-based battle simulator. So there might be different things that you can do with that, but that's really, going into more of the advanced. I wanted to kind of teach you the basics of the classes to kind of get you started, with that. And then again, different types of attacks, you can have that. We didn't go into rolling the dice for defense or rolling the dice for attack, but we can create, situations where that would be useful, especially for this type of thing. So there are different things that you can do. You just have to think about how you want to put that together. I was just trying to go over the basics of the Python class. I didn't want to sit there and kind of do like a full development on how to do everything. I just kind of wanted to show you the examples of the basics. So what we went over today is we went over the blueprints on creating that character class and how to assign the attributes to it, how to assign methods for those actions those characters will take, showed you like how to do shared and unique variables. And if you wanted to kind of encapsulation to do those private stats, you can do that as well. We showed you how to do that. And then we talked about the inheritance and how we can actually create a character class to call our main character class, I should say. So for example, when we created the wizard character, I call the character class. Okay. And then polymorphism, we talked about the same action, and this is where we took the different types of attacks and we just made it into attack. Pretty much pretty straightforward. And again, there's a lot more that we could have covered if we wanted to kind of get into more app development. Like if we was building something out that was going to be used long term. This purpose again was just to kind of teach you the basics and let you come up with ways that you want to use classes in your program. I'd like to know what you do with them, so just leave those in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys next time.